Wow. So yesterday, well, more like this morning, from midnight till 2 a.m. in the morning, I'm supposed to have my English class in Zoom, but because it's the presidential election, the class is canceled. Which is really shocking to me because in Hong Kong, something like this would never ever happen. Teachers would never even mention or talk about politics in front of their students. It's not a good idea in Hong Kong. But yeah, anyways, hey, Michigan, what's up? It's the Culture Detective here, investigating your favorite movies. And today I am back and I'm going to be making another triple movie review. And these three movies are also movies from uh, the USA. Actually, one of them is from UK, and they are all black and white film noirs. And film school is making me do this. College is making me do this. I mean, they're not making me make these reviews. They're showing us these movies, and I'm making these reviews because I've watched these movies. Anyways, the first movie, or actually the seventh movie I've watched, is Night and the City, released in 1950 from the director Jules Dassin. And wow, this film is probably my favorite noir film so far, and it's just really well written. So the plot is basically Richard Widmark's character. He's a con man. He is a fraud. He wants to get rich quick. And he came up with a really good idea in this movie where he tries to use a really famous wrestler celebrity as an opportunity for himself to run a wrestling company, basically. And he tries to, because this movie actually takes place in London. So in London, there is another big wrestling company who puts out, these wrestling shows. And because we have Richard Widmark's character, he has a wrestling company, so there has been some sort of rivalry. And because we have the big wrestling company, the OG one, that is not a fraud, and they begin to realize that this Richard Widmark person is a con man, or his character, I forgot his name. So throughout the entire film, the main character, the MC, is always standing on thin ice. He's always at the risk of being caught by the police, being caught red-handed, conning people, lying, committing fraud. And yeah, this movie, wow. This film, the pacing is pretty much flawless in my opinion right from the very beginning. The first very scene in the film is where he runs through alleyways in the night, and these alleyways are very narrow and crooked. And then there are also many other shots in this film where we see a lot of the city. There is a montage in the middle of the movie where the news is out, the cat's out of the bag. The main character, he's a fraud, he's a con man, and everyone just hates him and wants to get him, and he has to go from one place to another place to hide, and he can't trust anyone because people are willing to sell him out in order to gain money. And damn, the city being depicted, the very hustly bustly city, it's really well depicted. The sensation of guilt and desperation, as well as not being able to trust anyone around you, is really prominent in this movie as well. And the stakes are continuously higher and higher and higher and higher up until at the very end, which is tragic, not gonna lie. So yeah, I like this movie a lot. This is actually my favorite noir film I've seen. I didn't expect this one to be the favorite one I've seen, but it is my favorite one. So yeah, feeling a strong 8 on this thing. Maybe to a light 9, but I feel like if this movie is made in 2020 or in 2019, I wouldn't be as impressed. I would probably give it a strong 8, so I'm gonna stick with a strong 8. Very close to a light 9 though. Anyways, next movie I saw is Taste of Fear, released in 1961, a whopping 11-year jump. That's because when we watched this movie, it's a couple days before Halloween, and Westerners like to celebrate Halloween. So, Taste of Fear is actually a bit of a noir horror mixture, and this film is essentially about a woman who goes to her father's house, her very rich father's house in France to see her father and her stepmother, and she's never been there before. It's all new to her. This film is also a British film, by the way, so the main character is from the UK, but France is the actual location that this movie takes place in, so it's a bit of an alien territory for the characters. And in the house, the main character, played by Susan Strasberg, begins to realize that maybe her father has been murdered and his dead body is in the house somewhere, hidden somewhere, and she keeps on seeing her father's dead body. And then she would come back to that place, and then his dead body is gone. So she begins to think that she is crazy, and the people in the house, like the stepmother, Jane, I remember her name for some reason, and everyone else, Jane has another person who's a potential love interest, who's a doctor, played by Christopher Lee, and they're all like, "Wow, main character, you're going crazy," and there's this whole conspiracy going on. And I really, really like it. I think, it's the 1960s, and around that time, Alfred Hitchcock is just super duper famous and successful. I mean, this movie is very much inspired by Psycho, even though it's really well written, in my opinion. Not as great as Psycho, though. Psycho is still the OG. And there's a lot of twists and turns in this movie as well. A few twists at the end, which reminds me a lot of the more modern murder mystery thriller movies. Like Shutter Island, or even movies like The Prestige, where these movies are the most well known for how many twists and turns they have at the very, very end. And the psychological horror element in the movie is also pretty well done. And if there's another thing about this movie that I kind of like, that would be that this movie looks really elegant. I mean, again, we have an 11-year jump between 1950 and 1961, so obviously the camera quality is way better, and the camera movements feel so much more mature. And just a lot of slow pans, beautiful shots, even though it's black and white. The shots are still very beautiful composition-wise, and it's not a bad movie, not a bad film at all. Feeling a decent 8 on this thing. Earlier this morning, I watched the movie The Big Heat, directed by Fritz Lang, written by Sidney Boehm, and it stars Glenn Ford as the main character, whose name is Dave. So the plot is basically Dave is a cop. He's a copper. He's a policeman. And he's living in a society where gangsters, crime organizations are controlling the government and the police and everyone else in the town. Or in the city, for that matter. And so he had a murder case that he needs to solve, a homicide case. And he almost got the answer, and then his boss told him to stop. You know what? You don't need to investigate further. You're good. But he's like, nah, there's something fishy going on. So he further investigated the crime, and this had endangered his own family, and he had become very, very angry and hateful towards these gangsters, and he's like you know what, I'm gonna destroy all of the gangsters in the city. But he does it with nobility. He doesn't just do it with complete anger and hatred. At the very end, when he found the big bad guys, he didn't just kill them all or anything. He still wanted to bring justice to the situation. Rather than killing the big bad guys for his own satisfaction, he's like, you know what, I'm just gonna let the judicial system handle you. And yeah, while this movie is released in 1953, it doesn't feel very 50s. Like this film feels more 40s than it is in the 50s. The cinematography is not as good as I thought it would be. It's just very plain. There's not much use of shadows as well as chiaroscuro lighting, which is a strong contrast between the light and the dark, the bright and the shadows. There are a lot of scenes that's actually pretty well lit, where the walls just look gray and yeah, this movie doesn't explore moral ambiguity all that well. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just good versus evil. The main character is good, and the antagonists are evil, and now they're fighting each other, I guess. You know, there are a couple of characters that are bordering on good and evil, but at the end, the line is still kind of clear, so it doesn't have that depth that I would have liked it to be. And yeah, this movie is for me is a little underwhelming because there has been a lot of hype around it, and also the director is Fritz friggin Lang, one of the most important directors in the history of noir. I mean, the guy directed M and Metropolis, but this movie just didn't live up to the hype surrounding it, in my opinion. At the end of the day, it's just a pretty classic revenge tale, and it's a good story, you know, with tension and suspense. And the violent elements in the movie is also really well utilized, in my opinion. There are a couple of violent scenes. There's a hot coffee scene where one of the characters splash boiling coffee onto a woman, and that scene's supposed to be one of the most violent scene ever in the 1950s. And every time people watch this film in the 50s, they would like jolt. But when I watched that scene, I was like, ouch, that hurt. But I wasn't like disgusted or anything. But yeah, still not a bad movie. Feeling a strong 7, maybe to a light 8 on this thing. Honestly, I'll go with strong 7. It's just my personal opinion. So, have you watched Night in the City, Taste of Fear, and The Big Heat? From 1 to 10, how much rate them? Like if you like them, hate if you hate them, and please subscribe if you want more and if you want to help the channel grow. And thanks for watching. As for my next movie review, I'm going to review Borat 1, and then I'm going to review Borat 2. I originally wanted to review The New Mutant, but I can't see it, so I guess I won't be around to review it. And maybe, just maybe, I'll be able to watch Demon Slayer Mugen Train. So you have that to look forward to. But other than that, Meridian Brothers album review tomorrow. And yay.